So, geesh. Anyway, wow. There's too many buttons for my old brain to push. Okay. So finally we're here. So sorry about I'm a few minutes late trying to connect everything, and if you have any good advice for how an old lady can learn OBS multi-stream, let me know. So tonight this is part 2 of our collateral damage series about frontline workers who deal with both workplace bullying. They can be bullied, and they deal with the whole everybody, if it's another department or whoever it is, frontline workers like union representatives, association representatives, administrative assistants, human resources, and all those people who get calls or complaints around workplace bullying. That's what we're going to talk about. There's a lot of collateral damage that they experience, and we just don't talk about that because generally the only thing we talk about when it comes to workplace bullying is what, if you're the one being bullied, what you can do about it, right? Document, ignore it, that kind of thing. We don't talk about, again, that ripple effect and that collateral damage that impacts people who may not be in that core group where there's bullying, but they're still dealing with workplace bullying because they're having to deal with people who are being bullied, bystanders who are watching it or engaging it, and bullies make a lot of complaints about the person they're bullying. So they're dealing with all these other people, but it's impacting them. And there's collateral damage as a result of that. And one of the things, again, if we want to stop workplace bullying, we have to give those frontline workers, those people who are on the front lines of managing workplace bullying, the tools to do it. So one of the things we're going to talk about is I have the Workplace Accountability Toolkit, which gives you tools if you're the one being bullied, or if you're a bystander, how you can better manage those situations, how you can support people who are being bullied. If you're the one who's being bullied, there's a lot of microscripts, a lot of things to shut down bullies in ways that you may not have thought of. But for frontline workers who can also use those same tools that people who are being bullied use and bystanders use to better deal with the fallout from workplace bullying. And one of the things, again, that I remember from being bullied is, and I mentioned this last week, is sometimes when I would call my union rep, right, and that frontline worker, that administrative assistant, was the one fielding the calls. Who do I give it to? Do I make an appointment or whatever? Lots of times they're the first point of contact and we're unloading on them. I know that when I was involved in bullying, the people who called those frontline workers about me were unloading about how they hated me and what they thought about me. And some of those frontline workers, they were carrying the weight of that, right? And also they might have been being bullied, and they certainly weren't being treated with respect. I didn't always treat them with respect and dignity like they deserve. And one of the things we can do, again, is to help them and give them the tools to better deal with that collateral damage so that they're not impacted. And also that they shut down bullies or even bystanders or even those of us who are bullied if we are unloading inappropriately on them or whatever our behavior is. Again, I'm not saying any victims aren't immune from talking about the person who's being bullied inappropriately. Victims aren't immune from that, and oftentimes who they do that to is to have whoever will listen. And so two things are happening here at the same time. So, frontline workers, again, those people who are getting the calls about whether I'm being bullied, I'm watching it, or I'm the bully, those frontline workers who are managing that don't have the tools to deal with it because we're not talking about it. They're not even included in the conversation around the systematic problem of workplace abuse. And the second thing is they should be treated with respect and dignity and should be able to get out of difficult conversations if needed. Okay, I do not believe that anybody in the workplace should listen to me yell at them, period. And they shouldn't be listening to anybody yell at them. We shouldn't be doing those things in the workplace, period. But it happens. So what we have to do are two things. And this is, again, if you're a union organization, if you're an association, a professional association, if you're an organization, what you need to do, I'm going to say it as clearly as I can, you need to be giving these people tools to manage workplace bullying because they are affected by it. And fortunately for you, I have the Workplace Safety Kit, which you can get on shop.stopbulliedculture.com at a very reasonable price, and you can get it and buy it and share it with your team. And so what people need are ways to get out of difficult conversations. I mean, that is not just about bullying or workplace abuse. Tensions get high, things happen, and sometimes you need to get out of situations where tension's rising. And we have a tendency, and this is oftentimes women will stay in conversations, especially when there's a man there who's yelling at them, because we don't know how to get out of those conversations. And we don't feel like we should get out of those conversations. Again, it happens to all people, right? You want to get you have somebody who's kind of going off, and you want to get out. So what do you do? Okay, and these are things that are coming directly from my accountability toolkit and the workplace safety kit, which is, I think that a good thing to have in your toolkit across the board when you're in a professional, ways to get out of difficult things. I used to refer these as escape mechanisms. Me, I'm diabetic. So do I use that as an excuse to get out of difficult things? Yeah, I do. It's got to be good for something. So I would say things like, if things got tense, I would say, I don't have any lifesavers. I don't have any glucose tablets. I don't have any fruit snacks. My blood sugar is dropping. I'm just going to step out into my office for a second and get those. Okay, and I'll be right back. Okay, and then I would take time to gather my own thoughts to figure out another way to get out of that conversation with a person where there was tension. So you should always have, again, about 5 or 6 things on your list of how can I get out of this difficult conversation. Right, here's another one that works exceptionally well on the phone, and I did this frequently when I was a school social worker. That's why I learned it early on. You get parents who were yelling at me on the phone because they were upset for whatever reason, and I would say something like this. You know what, John? I get it. I understand. You're really upset. I can hear that in your voice. Okay? I have another meeting in 5 minutes. I'm required by my boss to go to. And I'm going to hang up the phone, and I'm going to call you back when I get out of that meeting. Thank you, John. I'm hanging up now. Boom, click. Yes, okay? And it was just a way that I didn't want John to be yelling at me. I understand he's upset, but you're not chewing me out for it, okay? And then I would always, as my word, call them back later when I had a plan for what I wanted to say to them, and 2, they could calm down. Because generally when I would call back, be it an hour, 2, the next day, they were calmer. Sometimes they would even say, I don't even remember calling you, okay? And so it's just a way, 2 things. It gets you out of that stressful situation. And 1, that's 1, sorry. And 2 is I got out of the conversation, and I also was signaling to them, no, you're not going to talk to me that way. I didn't come out and say it, but I said it. And it's just an easy way for you to hang up on someone who is yelling at you or screaming at you because you don't deserve that, period, across the board. Okay? So just having some of those things for you as a worker who's dealing with and managing bullying, that can be used across the board. You can cut off conversations, and you should. If I'm coming into your office venting about the person who's bullying me, right? Period. That kind of stuff should not and does not belong in the workplace. Okay? And so you can use it for me, for those people who are being bullied. You can use it for bystanders. You can use it for bullies who often are bullying people on the front lines to get what they want. Again, last week we talked about how bullies are not just in the one bully lane. They're in all lanes that will, that they can possibly get their fingers mingling in. So that's a way for you to easily shut down somebody who is yelling at you. So have those things, and don't say, "Oh, I can come up with something in the moment." Think about them. Think about how you're going to execute them. Think about some opportunities that might, make that go haywire. For example, someone might say, when I say, "Oh, I need to go back to my office to get some lifesavers," somebody might say, well, you know what, Jan, I have some right here for you. I have some candy. You can just eat this. Okay? Then I need to have a backup plan. Okay? What's my backup? If my first strategy doesn't work, you have to have a backup. Okay? Now, I never had that happen, and, my backup would have been, I'm also going to test my blood, so I'm going to go to my office. I'm going to do two things, and I don't think you have a glucose monitor, right? And so now, of course, if you have your own monitor on you, that's a problem. But I don't, so that's one I could still use. So you have to have a plan, and then a backup plan to your and a backup to your backup plan. Because what we know about bullies and people in that chaotic, stressful, difficult situation is they make it miserable, and they want to make sure that you're miserable, and you need a way to get out of that chaos. Okay? And so just having some escape plans. Quick, easy ways to get out. And the best thing is if you can make those about your job, it's even better. I have a meeting that with Dr. So-and-so I have to get to, right? Makes you credible, and they're not going to question it. Because they're not focused on you're getting out of that conversation. They're focused on themselves and what they want to do. Okay? So you have to set up your boundaries and have ways that, when somebody crosses a boundary, if somebody calls you a name, that's your boundary, then you get out of that conversation. And all of these things aren't just about bullying. These are things you can use across the board to get out of difficult conversations. Now, you can't, one of my rules is that your strategy when you're dealing with people who are being bullied or bystanders or even bullies, it's the same thing that I would tell somebody who's being bullied is you can't have a strategy that requires you not to do your job, right? So any strategy has to allow for you to do your job and to do it well. So for example, I couldn't have a strategy if I'm required to meet with my boss, who is my bully, and we're supposed to have a meeting once a week, which is an hour long. My strategy can't be to get out of that meeting, because then that requires me not to meet my job requirements. My strategy would be, how can I distract this bully from, negating and criticizing me? What can I do to keep myself grounded? What can I do to make sure that my emotions stay calm? Again, something else that's in the workplace safety kit and also in the workplace accountability toolkit are grounding techniques. And when I'm talking about grounding techniques, and what I talk about in my safety kit is not just, you have to deep breathe, right? I'm talking about what happens when deep breathing doesn't cut the mustard, right? I'm talking about can you implement grounding strategies in workplace bullying, okay? And again, if you're on the frontline worker, if you're a frontline person and you're getting a lot of calls, because for bullying, right? If you're an administrative assistant or a union representative, you're not just getting calls from me. You might be getting calls from all of the nurses across your state, and we know bullying's rampant in nursing, and so the likelihood that that's happening to you is damn near 100%. So it can be very stressful. So you have to have good grounding techniques that you can use. And what that means is you can't just, again, say, oh, I'm just going to deep breathe. You have to have more than that, because again, what we do know, and the reality is these are extremely, extremely stressful situations. The other thing that I really think is important is when you are fielding these calls and people are talking to you about workplace bullying or toxicity or conflict, those three things are not the same. We, and I sometimes do too, use those words interchangeably. I do not ever use the word conflict interchangeably with workplace bullying or abuse, sometimes with toxicity. But again, one of the things that's really important when you're fielding and getting into these conversations is you have to be able to differentiate between, am I talking to somebody who's dealing with a conflict, an interpersonal conflict with that person and their supervisor? Or am I dealing with somebody who's dealing with toxicity, okay? Or am I dealing with somebody who's dealing with full-blown workplace bullying? And if you can't differentiate between the three of those things and know when one crosses the line into something else, then how you respond is very problematic. Because if I'm calling you and I'm saying to you, you know, they're bullying me or this is happening and it's conflict, what you might tell me to do isn't effective, right? It's more likely, however, that you think it's conflict and I'm dealing with bullying, and whatever it is that you say, you tell me to ignore it, that's ineffective. You tell me to go talk to the bully, that's ineffective. You know, you tell me to document, well, what am I documenting, right? So again, how you figure out what is super, super vital when you're dealing with all of these people who might be dealing with different things. And so, and finally then, what happens with people who are on the front line, to help them deal with the collateral damage, you can use scripts. I'm a huge fan of microscripts, just for short phrases to shut down people, okay? Don't get defensive, right? Don't let them, again, short scripts to set your boundaries, have escape plans. I'm a huge fan of that, obviously, okay? I'm a huge fan of grounding techniques. And again, thinking about what works and what won't work, right? Because you know yourself, okay? And deep breathing might not be one of the things that you're going to go to. Something else might work, okay? And again, figuring out what works and what happens if it doesn't work and you can still feel your emotions rising, because one of the things that happens, again, that we don't talk about when it comes to frontline workers dealing with collateral damage, when I'm calling them every week saying the same damn thing over and over, they begin to get annoyed with me. And maybe rightly so, but maybe not. And what can you do if you're in that situation to help you not get annoyed with me, right? It might help to be able to ask the right questions and differentiate between conflict and toxicity and bullying. And here's the other thing too, which is why I think these accountability and safety kits are so important is you told me the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over. You were like a broken record when I called. And what you said wasn't effective. Just ignore it, doesn't work. But it might if it's a one-off with conflict. It doesn't with bullying. It might with toxicity, depending on what level of toxicity that is. Telling me to go to mediation, I might not need that with conflict. It doesn't work with bullying. It might work with toxicity. So again, the response that you have, and often, and we mentioned this last time, is you are limited with the response depending on your organizational parameters. In most organizations, don't talk about workplace bullying. And if they do, they are talking about it and getting trainers and experts in who are treating it like interpersonal conflict. They're not really giving you tools to manage when Jan keeps calling you every week, because you're not included in the conversation when people are training about workplace bullying. You're not part of it. It's just me and that bully over there. But the collateral damage that you're experiencing is real. And because you're an important part of managing it, how you respond is important. So you can say things, instead of saying document it, you might say something like this. It's important that you document. Here are some things that you can include in your documentation, and you should organize it, and you should do this, right? So if you have some, or you could say this. If you go to Dr. Kircher's Stop Bully Culture Shop, she has smart documentation at work, which teaches you how to document, right? And it isn't just by, if I'm the bully, or excuse me, if I'm the person being bullied and I'm calling you, what you could also say is find patterns and find those times, Jan, when you're vulnerable, and let's then come back when you figure those out, and we'll figure out strategies to better help you manage what's happening to you. Okay? So you can't just tell somebody to document, because that could mean 1,000 things, right? You could adapt a protocol for documentation, which could then be utilized for workplace bullying, sexual harassment, if you have racism in the workplace. If you have a documentation protocol where you say, here's the parameters that we want people to document, okay? Because the thing is, if you have a documentation protocol, then that can be used across the board, and two, people know that you're going to look at that because it'll all be uniform, and what it says is, we take this issue seriously. So the other thing, again, you can help people get grounded and learn grounding techniques, because one of the biggest mistakes that if you're being bullied is people get defensive. I hear this over and over and over and over again, with people saying, I'm just defensive. They just do this, they trigger me and I get defensive, and that's one of the biggest mistakes that people who are being bullied make. You can say to people, let's help you get grounded. And you know what? Here's this workplace toolkit where you can stay grounded at work when you're being bullied or there's toxicity. It's just a good thing. So not only is this workplace safety kit something you can use, if you're an organization or a union or an association, you can have these to give to people so they better manage workplace bullying. If somebody had said to me, Jan, learn how not to interact and respond to the bully, stay grounded in your meetings, and figure out when you're vulnerable, and let's strategize and figure out a way that you can better manage that person, and let's learn how you can start to take your power back. If the union president had said that to me, it would have done two things: confirmed that she understood what I was doing, and that she cared enough about me to help me better strategize for a situation she knew that she wasn't going to be able to do jack shit with, right? But what did she do? She stopped taking my calls, right? They never even looked at my documentation until after I got fired, and then they needed to file a grievance, okay? But they didn't file a grievance on my behalf while I was there that was successful, because they didn't know what was going on. And if I had to say my druthers, she thought I was the problem because she had never looked at my documentation, okay? In fact, after I got fired, she said, yeah, I did look through your documentation. I finally got to it. Really? Really? You finally got to it. But if you had a documentation protocol, you would know where to look. I would know what to give you, how to give it to you, so that you could easily look at what was going on and the problems that I was having and who was doing it and what I had done to try to resolve it. Right? So we don't have tools to deal with it, because the conversation still continues around it's Jan and her bully. And so what we have to do is we have to give people who are managing those frontline workers tools to better manage it, because that also has a ripple effect back, right? So we talked about last week the collateral damage. When the bully drops that rock in the pond, it ripples out. But when people who are managing bullying, like human resources assistants, unions, union representatives, associations, association representatives, administrative assistants, okay? Very important people in the fight against workplace bullying, when they have tools to help and manage that they can give me, that they can give a bystander, that they can help hold a bully accountable, then the ripple effect comes back, okay? Because bystanders learn how to do more than, oh, speak up. They learn how to act. They learn how to assess their own risk and act for the betterment of everyone in the organization. As a person who's been bullied, I learned that I'm valued in the workplace, and you're giving me the tools to do what you're telling me to do, to document, to do this, right, to stay grounded. You're giving me the tools to do that, which makes me a better professional. And you're also then having bullies be held accountable. You have tools for that. And so then the ripple effect comes back, and when bystanders start acting, when I start and stop responding to the bully, their pond gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And then we begin to be able to make and stop workplace bullying. Again, if you're interested in any of the tools I talked about tonight, you can go to shop.stopbullyculture.com. They're all right there. If you're interested in getting your organization or your workplace the workplace safety kit, you can email me at jan@stopbullyculture.com, or you can message me and I can send you some previews of those. But you have to have the tools. Everybody has to be prepared with the tools in order to stop workplace bullying. So thank you so much. It was great to be here. Sorry for the little snafu. I'm still... so if you know anything about how I can manage OBS multi-stream, I would love that. You can message me. This old lady needs some help. So anyway, thank you so much, and I will see you next week.